Hey, welcome to Goals, Grit, and Some Woo-Woo Shit. I'm your host, Una Duncan. And let me tell you what I love most about my job. I get to meet the coolest people. I had someone post in my MFA group the other day, I don't use the workout videos. I don't follow the meal plans. I'm here because this group has the highest concentration of badass women on the internet, which is freaking true. And I should also give a little shout out to our very small but very mighty group of men who are in our group who have decided that the best place to be is a minority amongst badass women. Those are pretty cool dudes. So here's an example of the badassery. A new member named Shannon Moroney recently posted that she was so glad she's feeling great in her body, super fit, because she's about to be a guest on Dr. Phil. And she was going in feeling really confident about how she looked. So I asked Shannon, what are you talking about on Dr. Phil? And she sent me a package in the mail, including her best-selling book, a memoir called Through the Glass. On the cover of the book, you see through shattered glass an image of a woman and a man on their wedding day, and the woman looks so happy. She's got this huge, big, radiant smile. And on the cover it says, 1 month into our marriage, my husband committed horrific, violent crimes. In that instant, the life I knew was destroyed. I vowed on that day that I would be whole again. This is my story. Today, Shannon is going to tell you that story. So now would probably be a good time to warn you that this episode does contain discussions of physical violence and sexual assault. You're going to learn the decision Shannon made early on that prevented her from sliding into depression and isolation. You're also going to learn what you should do and what you should say if someone you know is facing an unthinkable tragedy. And hint, it's not a casserole. 3, you're going to learn the difference between big T trauma and little t trauma and how to go about healing from both. Shannon is an internationally recognized advocate of restorative justice. She's a powerful speaker. She was named one of the world's 50 most resilient people by the Global Resilience Project. She was also named a New York Times Woman in the World recommended writer and is featured by the International Forgiveness Project. She travels extensively to lead transformative forgiveness and healing retreats for people and communities overcoming trauma and those that cause it. I know you are going to find this conversation absolutely fascinating.
It's time to get your head out of your ass and start creating a life of no regrets. Whether you want to lose weight, get rich, or manifest a hot threesome on the beach, you're going to want to turn this up. This is Goals, Grit, and Some Woo-Woo Shit with your host, best-selling author and professional butt kicker, Una Duncan.
Oh my gosh, Shannon, I have been devouring your book and I have so many questions for you. But let's first bring the listeners up to speed. Would you do us the favor of just telling us a little bit about your story that I have spent the last week completely immersed in and fascinated by?
So essentially, my book's called Through the Glass. It's my memoir. It begins with, I woke up on October the 5th, 2005. Probably happier and more contented than I've ever been in my life. I just turned 30. I'd just been married. And I woke up in a hotel room where I was attending a counseling conference. I was a high school guidance counselor. And I thought I might be pregnant. And I remember lying there and I couldn't wait to go home to my husband, Jason, who was just my soulmate. And then there was a knock in my hotel room and it was a police officer. He said, I'm not here because anybody has died. I'm here about your husband, Jason. He was arrested last night and he's been charged with multiple very serious charges, including sexual assault and aggravated sexual assault. And that was the moment that everything in my life changed.
And your first thought was that clearly this is a mistake. There's no way my husband did that?
I had a split second to think that. And then the officer said that Jason had called 911 himself after committing these crimes. And then I knew that there was no mistake. And what also rushed back to me in that moment was the crime that Jason had committed 18 years prior when he was a teenager. And he committed a crime of murder, and he'd served a prison term for that. And I'd met him after many years of being back in the community. We met at a soup kitchen where he was the head chef, and actually would have loved all that with your food background, fitness background, how you can donated Kentucky Fried Chicken into something really healthy for 50, 200 people that have food insecurity. That's what Jason did many times a week, each week. And that's how I met him. And that's where I fell in love with him. And to see that person living that good life back in the community and trusting him, but also everyone around him, from the professionals, correctional services, who are all saying, he's our best guy. This is the true lived example of what a rehabilitative justice system looks like. Jason had many wonderful friends and supporters in the community. And so I made a very head over heart choice when I chose to continue to get to know him. And my reward for taking all those steps to make sure that he was a safe person was a wonderful and incredible relationship. Every media report made it look as though Jason just been released from prison. I must be the pathetic loser. I don't know what all the terrible things you could call me that had helped bring him out of prison, bring him back into the community so that he could commit more crimes. And that's very often how I was treated.
Yeah. But the facts were, you met him in a soup kitchen. He was a model citizen. He was volunteering. He was helping. He told you right off the bat, I have this history. I have so much remorse for what I've done. I've done my time. I'm moving through the system. You spoke to his psychologist, his parole officer, and they all assured you, I think the quote in the book is, he has zero chance of being dangerous. They said that, right?
I don't think they would use the word zero, but he is the absolute lowest risk to reoffend. And we have no concerns.
Yeah. And so you talk about the process that you went through when you made this very sort of informed decision to keep dating this person. And it's a really beautiful love story that you describe. And it really makes you have so much empathy for how much was lost in that moment that the police officer came to your hotel room. But it seemed to me that after that happened, it was almost like you weren't allowed to grieve because there was this expectation that the horrible nature of Jason's crime erased everything that was good that had happened before. Was that how you felt people responded?
Yeah, absolutely. But even more than about him, it was about me. Because people didn't know, not that many people knew Jason. I was much more well-known in the community. That's just how I am. And so it was really, the truth was that Jason went to solitary confinement. So he went to the inside world. That's what it's called, prison terms, inside world. And I was left on the outside to deal with all of the vitriol, blame, shame, accusations, questions that people had. And Jason actually didn't have to deal with any of that. He was in a cell alone where he was given 3 meals a day through a slot in the store. And there were times when it was so frightening to be on the outside that I wanted to trade places with him. And I thought he should have to come back out and clean up the mess that he made.
Of your life.
Of my life, of the lives of the victims, the community, everyone that was affected by this in this massive ripple effect of violence, including the crime scene in our home. The day of the crime scene, get assaulted, as it turned out, as I found out in stages as we went through this first horrific day and police interviews and so on, that he had assaulted 2 women who were customers in his store where he worked. And then he brought them to our home, which was very close by. It was from our home that these women very bravely tried to talk with him, tried to rehumanize him, and they were very successful in doing that and bringing him from whatever psychological state that he was in back to a place of humanity, to the point where he apologized to them. He took a phone call from me, because you remember I mentioned to listeners that I had spoken to him the night before, told him I thought I might be pregnant. I didn't know that these women were in our home, injured, fearing for their lives. And then after that, he went to a local payphone and called 911. That is another thing that was never, ever shared in the media at all.
That he reported himself.
That he reported
and said,
himself.
Please save these.
And furthermore, no one came, so we went back to the same payphone and called 911 again. But none of that ever made the media at all. It just doesn't sell newspapers.
And so they were reporting all the horrible things that he did, and he did do horrible things. You said in their book, you couldn't believe that people would interpret your ongoing love for him as minimizing his offenses. Because that's the kind of the idea that people had. If someone does this and it's unquestionable that he has done this. Therefore, you have to stop loving them immediately. Do you think it's possible to just erase love based on behavior?
Absolutely not. Our emotion is not like a tap. We don't just turn it on and turn it off. We especially don't turn it on and turn it off with the people that we're absolutely closest to.
Yeah.
That's a fantasy response that doesn't exist. And I think, yes, what was so angering and frustrating for me and damaging to me was how quickly people left the judgment of me. I think it was like a very clear line in the sand was drawn for me. It was drawn for me at the police station by a victim services counselor. I'm using air quotes if you're listening to this, who just basically said to me, when I asked about how the victims were doing, is there anything that my family or I can do for them? They were on my mind constantly. I didn't know who they were. I knew their names. They were on a search warrant in my house, but I didn't know what they looked like. I didn't know if I was running into them or seeing them in town. And so, and all my family and I wanted to do is help them. But when I asked at the police station, this person said, you need to understand. They don't want to hear it. They don't need to hear from Jason's arena. Very clearly, you're on Jason's side. And essentially, you cannot have feelings for both the victims and the offender. And then she sent me home. And this was right after my employer took my job away from me, because how could I be a good counselor when I was married to this person?
Hey, dude, if you are enjoying this episode and you have a friend that you think might also benefit from this information, please share it with them. That helps my podcast so much, and it's going to help your friend. Share the love. Thanks so much. Yeah, it's almost like everybody wants to just draw sides. It's like good guys and bad guys. And I think that isn't that happening more and more these days, that people are getting really siloed into different sides. That's what you found. It was like, if you visited Jason in the prison, or if you made any inquiries as to whether he might have had some trauma in his past that caused, then you were immediately on his side. That was how it was perceived, right?
Yeah. And for the most part, people who are quick to judge knew very little about me or anything that was going on. My decision to go and speak to Jason in the jail was because I deserved answers.
Yeah.
I needed answers. How could I answer everyone else's questions when I had no idea? Why did he do it? How did he do it? What was going through his mind? What's wrong with him? I couldn't answer any of those things. And I wanted to know more than anything else. He had confessed to the police that he'd also been committing crimes of voyeurism against me and against other people by setting up a camera in the bathroom of our home. So this gave me official victim status in the justice system. But honestly, it's the least of the ways in which I was victimized. Finding out that you've been videotaped, it was extremely unpleasant. But far worse was the victimization that I endured as the wife of a sex offender, which became my title the day that police officer came to my door. And everything else was stripped away. Everything else that I was, that I built my life around it. Educator, respected professional, homeowner, newlywed, volunteer, all those things in my community, nothing seemed to matter anymore to some people. And then there are people who are capable of nuance and compassion and understanding, and thank God for them.
Yeah, you had such varied experiences in the justice system, from extremely negative. You talk about how you were grilled in detail about your sex life with your husband, not knowing that you were being watched by other officers, which is so... Right, they filmed. And then specifically a female officer who started out quite nasty, and then after talking to you for a bit said you didn't meet her expectations of what his wife would be like. You mentioned there's this expectation that the wife of someone who's accused of sexual assault would be a codependent enabler, and that you really had to fight against that stereotype, and you lost your job and a lot of friends because of that. Yeah, but not everybody shut you out. You had some incredible support. So for example, your parents, and this one blew me away. You had a coworker who went to your house to remove the couch that had bloodstains and hair on it. And then you found out later he actually knew the victim.
Yeah. It's strange experience for me right now. I'm getting chills as you tell me that, and remembering, I haven't thought about that moment for a long time. And that man remains a hero in my life. And then being able to take responsibility for themselves, to take care of themselves in doing it, rather than put it back on me.
Yeah.
These were the things that kept it just, I don't know, for lack of a better term, it saved my soul. And that's why I've always been a life-loving person. And my commitment to myself and to my parents and to anyone who knew me and loved me and still loved me after I did nothing wrong was to make that commitment to still being a life-loving person. There were so many things I realized instantly I had zero control over, I would never get back, that I had to. And this is what people who endure victimization or trauma, or when our lives are, for whatever period of time, the reins of our lives are taken into someone else's hands, all we're left with is a choice about how we're going to respond to it. And I remember very distinctly being in my living room and looking out, and it was like a battlefield. It was like an earthquake had happened. And standing alone in my living room and looking at it and going, what can I still hold on to? What am I going to hold on to? And just deciding that no one or no one's actions or no violence was going to take away the most fundamental part of me, which is my optimism, my ability to love. People tend to know me for my smile.
Yeah.
So usually what people will say is they remember about me, and how could I allow that? How could I allow that? That wouldn't be fair to anybody. And so that is a commitment I made very early on. And one of the first ways I lived out that commitment was to wake up every single day and put on my earrings. And that's where it began.
Just a small ritual that reminded you who you were.
Every single day. I don't know how I'm going to get through. I don't know what tomorrow's bringing. It's going to be more going to court. It's going to be speaking with police. It's going to be, how do I get a divorce? I'd just been married. What do I do with Jason's things? What? No one arrives at your door with, or you don't go to the door of a jail either, and you're not given a welcome to hell kit.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of what my book, in writing my book, I decided this is the welcome to hell kit. It's the book I needed to read when this happened to me that I couldn't find anywhere. That's what we need in crisis. We need to know we're not alone, that our experience is unique, that it's not unrelatable to other people. I started just doing a lot of mental math and saying, okay, how many people are incarcerated in Canada? At the time, there were about 15,000 people federally incarcerated, but in the US, it's 2.3 million. So you go, okay, if everyone has 10 people who knew them at the time, because people who commit violent crimes were not born in test tubes. Everyone is born as a human being, and nobody is one-dimensional. And so this is the reality of what we have to face and have to cope with. And I think there were people who were ready and able and willing to do that, to face that complexity alongside me. And there were people who were not ready or didn't want to, and had the luxury of being able to literally put extra locks on their door, write me and tell me about it, and then cut me and everything else out of their life so that they didn't have to face it.
Oh my gosh. Given that, I love that you gave the example of you standing there and just deciding this will not kill my smile forever. This will not destroy who I am. And I'm going to start by putting on the earrings. You make another few decisions in the book that when I read them, I literally, Shannon, I had to pause and think, oh my God, this is so strong. So here's what really struck me. One, when you said that you would not see your house as a place where people were hurt. You would decide to see your house as a place where people were saved. Because at the end of the day, Jason did not kill those women. He made a phone call, and the women were amazing and talked him down. So you were like, I'm going to reframe this vision of my house, not as a crime scene, but as a place where people were saved. And then you make another decision. You were holding a baby for the first time after Jason committed his crimes. And at the time, before, you were hoping that you were pregnant and really looking forward to being a mom. And then, of course, that was another dream that collapsed with his arrest. And you were holding a baby and you made a decision. I will never be sad holding a baby. I will be happy holding babies.
Gosh, I haven't cried about these things in a long time.
Struck me. They impacted me so much because I had to stop and think, I don't know if I would have the mental fortitude to make those kind of decisions, to make those decisions to be happy. And I was so impressed by them.
It's interesting now. You're telling me this now, and it's a beautiful experience to be able to respect oneself and to look back and think, gosh, when I was just 30 and in that extreme trauma, to have that kind of presence of mind. But it is that talking about decision making, and we're talking about goals, grit, and maybe we'll get to the woo-woo shit too, because there's some of that. But it is, I think, that kind of determination and that just deciding, like, just make the decision. This isn't about if I finish the race, if that's what that's what your goal is. It's about when I finish the race. This isn't about if I am in another situation where I could possibly be happy again. It's like when I get to a situation where there is even 1 second of opportunity for happiness or joy or celebrating somebody else, I'm going to take it and I'm going to hold this little baby, this perfect little life, and celebrate her. And that it was a very life-saving and soul-saving decision to have made. And that lies within all of us. And I think that's a really good thing to know. I think what all of us have the power to be able to do that, to determine our own mindset. And then we need a lot of support to be able to maintain that mindset.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about the support you got. Another quote that I loved, I think you said something to the effect of, what am I going to do? And Georgina said, you were going to cry for a long time and we are going to be here. And I thought that is such a beautiful thing to say, because it gives you permission to grieve. And it doesn't try and give you some false cheer up bullshit. And I wanted to ask you, because I know that you have gone on to be an expert in trauma. And given your personal and your professional experience, do you have any tips on what to do or what to say when someone you know is experiencing something that is so unthinkably tragic?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Do I? In fact, I even have a whole line of greeting cards that help you it's called Find the Words, to help you make sure you say the right thing, or don't say the wrong thing, or worse, don't say anything at all. And it's very simple. So really following along of Georgina's lines, I remember so well when she said that to me. I believe I was lying on the bathroom floor at that point. And she came and she got down next to me. She just got very close down. It's about being there with somebody. It's about being companioned on their journey. So, for example, we all find out, I know lots of listeners will have this experience. I'm sure you do too. You're going through something difficult. Somebody says something like, everything happens for a reason.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
So, one of my cards actually says, not everything happens for a reason. And on the inside, it says, I'm here to support you in the difficult. Another one says, this is my best-selling card. And I'm saying this to you just because people can get cards and they all go to support my programs for survivors of sexual assault, sex trafficking, and trauma. But another card says, on the outside, I don't know what to say. And on the inside, it says, but I can listen. And this is like one of the great gifts that we all, again, have the ability to do, is to listen to someone. You don't have to say the right thing. All you have to say is, I'm here. You can, and then be there. Yeah. Don't do that. I'm here. And then actually, when you ask me for help, I'm not really there. But that non-judgmental listening is one of the most essential tools for healing. People go to see a therapist. That's why I'm a therapist. That's why I was a counselor before this, because it is a privilege and a gift to be able to listen to someone, to be with them in some of their most painful and vulnerable moments and help them feel safe and loved and secure. And when we do that, we're empowering somebody else to have the strength to figure their own way out of whatever problem they're in. When we give advice, we're actually disempowering that person. We're thinking of what I would do or what I think I would do, but actually we don't really know because maybe we've never really been down in that same dark hole that the person's been in. I think something that we ask people a lot is like, is there anything I can do? Mm-hmm. And usually when we're in crisis, we don't know. We don't think anyone can help us with anything.
Yeah.
So this is advice that I give, but is to be able to have a few things that you actually offer to somebody very specifically in a difficult time. So I can only imagine what you're going through. I'm great at making small size dinners in packaging that you can recycle. I like some of those brought over to you. So not I'm going to bring over a casserole, I'm going to sit and visit with you for 2 hours and take all your energy. And then I'm going to leave my casserole dish, which then you need to wash out and watch it pile up with every other casserole dish on your dining room table. Right. I'm not trying to knock the
well-intentioned casserole givers.
Well-intentioned casserole giver. But just taking something that could be really good and just refining it a little bit as well. Or you could say something like, I'm not sure if you want to be alone or if you prefer to be with people, but I can offer both things. I can come and sit with you. We can talk or not talk. We could go for a walk, or I could take your kids for a couple of hours. I could shovel your driveway. There's a lot of practical things that people can do if they don't feel really well equipped emotionally to be able to sit with someone and hear those really hard things they might be going through.
Yeah. Yeah. But don't make them think about, I don't want to think about what. Yeah.
It's kind of like with little kids too, where you do we want to limit a choice. Do you want Cheerios or Shreddies?
Yes. That's
about as big of a decision that people in crisis or in trauma can really handle. All of it has to come from that place of non-judgment of, I am not in your shoes. Jumping to conclusions is
not
very
helpful.
Dangerous. Yeah. Very dangerous, helpful, and can cause a lot more harm. And we're all responsible for taking part in rolling back the ripple effect of trauma, or in my case, crime.
This podcast is made possible by Fit Feels Good, my online fitness and nutrition company. Here's what we do.
I have so many incredible benefits from the MFA program. It literally changed my life. I have the book, Healthy AF. I'm absolutely in love with my life now. I find that the healthy habits that I built are amazing to go back to. The benefits that you're going to see as a woman in your 40s plus are things you could have never imagined. The key, which I know Una talks about over and over again, is loving your body now, not what you're envisioning it to be.
Hey, if you're liking this episode and you want to make sure you don't miss the next one, you can sign up at unaduncan.com/podcast, and I'll be sure to keep you in the loop. Okay, back to the podcast. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience with the justice system was not great, and it's made you an international advocate for restorative justice. Can you explain a bit about what restorative justice is versus what we would understand the justice system to be?
Yeah, sure. So let's call the kind of standard system we have, let's call it criminal justice system, conventional criminal justice. So mainly we see criminal justice, first of all, see crime, or especially violent crime, as an assault against the state. So in Canada, let's call in Jason's case, the Queen versus Jason Staples. Jason didn't actually commit harm and pain and suffering to the Queen of England.
No.
So this is the first point at which we see a problem with the justice system, because people who are actually directly affected, in this case, Jason's assault victims, their families, their friends, their community, our community, all of us who are affected in the ripple effect, the aftermath. So we see an absence of human effect of crime. So criminal justice sees it assault against the state, the Queen of England versus, or United States versus whomever. And then we have three questions in criminal justice. We ask, who did it? It's extremely rare that we have someone like Jason that's, I did it. I did it. I'm responsible for it. you can send me away forever. That's what Jason. We ask who did it. Maybe we get an answer, maybe we don't. Oh, sorry. We start with what law was broken.
Okay.
List of charges. Who did it? Maybe we find out, maybe we don't. And then if we do find out, what punishment does that person deserve?
Okay.
And that's it.
All right.
That's where the criminal justice system ends. And maybe someone goes to jail, maybe they don't.
Okay.
If someone goes to jail, most of the time when they come out, they are far worse off than they were when they went in. So there's a fact. Restorative justice, different questions are asked. The first question is, who was harmed? As soon as we ask that, we're opening ourselves up to understand that wide ripple effect of crime. All of the people that were harmed. And that includes the offender. Because we're also talking about, we have to be very realistic about how many people are incarcerated because they have mental health problems, because they are victims themselves, they've been oppressed, they have been criminalized. There's all sorts of reasons why people even end up in prison in the first place. And there's a great amount of complexity there. So we have to also look at what were the conditions of the person's life and of their mind when they committed this, whatever crime it was that they did. So that becomes important as well. But the most important thing in restorative justice is the victim and the experience of the direct victim and all the collateral victims. Once we know who's been harmed, then we're going to ask, what are their needs? What do you need? We're not going to tell them, you know what you need? You know what you need, Una? For that taxi driver that took you on a completely roundabout route and cost you $100 and you were late for your best friend's wedding and you were scared and all that. You know what you need, Una? You need him to serve a 3-month jail sentence on weekends. Is that meaningful for you, Una?
Not really.
What do you want?
I want my money back and I want a big apology.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe you're going to want to know, how am I going to make sure this guy never does this again? Because I know what my experience was like for me. And the idea that maybe my friend or my sister or something is also going to go through this, it's not okay with me. Maybe you want to go to some counseling because that was scary. And that trauma, that experience also reminded you of other trauma, other scared times in your life. So you're going to want to deal with this because you don't want this to stop you from getting in more cabs. Maybe you're not going to go out. This is how, so we're going to ask you, what is it that you need? Now, of course, if you say, I want him hung in a gallows in the middle of town. That's not what we need. That's not what we need.
Yeah.
But we want to be able to fulfill your needs. So once you've told us what your needs are, then we're going to ask the third question of restorative justice, whose responsibility or obligation is it to fulfill those needs? What can the offender do? What can the community offer you? Are there other systems or regulations that also need to be looked at to ensure your safety? So that is where a really interesting dialogue can really take place. So when people go through restorative justice processes, which are well across the world. So this isn't woo-woo shit. This is not prison pillow fluffing and let's get everybody in a circle and sing Kumbaya.
Okay.
This is about high level accountability. This is about changing and repairing and, like it says in the word, restoring a level of trust and health to society by working with the person who's caused the harm and working for the needs of the person who's been misdirectly. So you have a son, right?
Yeah, 2 boys.
We got 2 boys. Okay, so you've got kids. Okay, this is great. So I'm guessing that your little boys argue sometimes between each other.
Sometimes.
I have 10 girls, so they're the best of friends. They're like a little married couple. And sometimes once in a while, I call them the Bickertons. They get into these little things, right? So we know what it's like. Say one of your sons feels really bad. He's a good kid, and he knows, wow, he really lost his cool. He really hurt his brother. He could be very likely to say, Mom, I'm never going to have dessert for the rest of my life. Or you can ground me for a week because of what I did. But if maybe now he's a teenager and he did something really not so good, I don't know, making 9 doors.
Have you met my sons?
Community, right? And I spoke to them pre-show. And And so people have been hurt. They are so much going to rather you say, yep, you're grounded forever. Then if you say, actually, you know what's going to happen here? You're going to spend a little bit of time by yourself thinking about what you've done. Then you're going to come into dialogue with your brother. You're going to look at his hurt face and his bruise you caused on his arm, and you're going to listen to him tell you about how it made him feel when you did this. Or we're going to walk over that senior's home and we're going to talk to those people. We're going to hear how they were all woken in the night by your Nikki Nine dooring them. And then you're going to apologize to them. And then you're going to shovel the snow off of the sidewalks there for a week. That is really at the heart of restorative justice. And it is way harder to do that than go to your room for a long time. But my daughter said to him, she's like, so, Mommy, basically jail is like a really, really long time out. It's just time. It's just meaningless time. Like, it's doing nothing for anybody. It doesn't help the healing process. It doesn't do anything for the victim. I guess it's nice to know that as long as your bad boy's son is grounded, he is safe from harming those two people at the senior's home. That's good to know. That's something that grounding or jail can do. But what happens when it's over? What about what's left behind? People are still feeling unsafe. They're still feeling confused. They still have questions like, why me? Why did you do it? What went through your mind? So this is really what we get into with restorative justice.
And is this part of the work that you do in helping people heal from crime? You use the word trauma and you talk about big T and little t trauma. Could you define what those are? And
yeah, big T trauma is the one that most of us will recognize as trauma. That's kind of what happened to me. Life was pretty good. Yeah, I had ups and downs in my life. I'd been through some difficult things. But then all of a sudden, a massive thing happens. It's extremely noticeable that changes the course of my life. Big T trauma is also, it's an earthquake. It's a car accident. It's things that tend to be very obvious.
Okay.
Little T trauma, or I call it woodpecker trauma, is smaller things that build up and are recurring over time that actually cause the same amount of damage, but they tend to go a little unnoticed or people get used to them. That's bullying, oppression, racism, chronic abuse, poverty, all sorts of things that lots of my clients will come to me and they'll say, I don't have any big trauma, or I don't think I should even be in therapy because nothing really bad ever happened to me, but I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety, or I can't seem to make any relationships work. So then we know all we have to do is look back and go, tell me about, one of the first things I do in therapy is super fun because I'm just like you and I love to have a lot of fun. I say, let's make a list of all the bad things that have ever happened to you.
Okay, that does sound like
right?
fun.
Isn't that awesome? It's so great. But I get people to tell me in like a trauma-informed way, which is, you're not going to tell me all the details. That's not going to be helpful. You're just going to be reliving. I just want to know what are the bad things that happened to you. So we make a little list and it goes like, okay, I was 6 when I peed my pants in front of the entire class and everyone laughed at me. I was 7 when my dad left. I was 8 when he came back. I was between the ages of 10 and 14, I was really bullied at school. And then things were okay. Then this little thing happened. Other times I've got people with big T all the way along. So no matter what, I always say pain is pain. And the most important thing to understand about trauma is what it makes you believe about yourself. That's what we need to understand. And that's often what we need to correct. So when bad things happen, we experience injury. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you go out for a walk in the forest and you scratch yourself on a tree branch and kind of a deep scratch. It's like it's bleeding and whatnot. So in that exact moment, you receive this physical injury. Your body always wants to heal. So it's going to start to try to do that on its own. It's going to bleed to cleanse the wound. Then it's going to scratch over to heal and protect the wound. And then eventually the scab will fall off. Maybe you have a scar, maybe you don't. But you're okay. The body can handle that level of healing. You also received perhaps a tiny psychological injury. I'm so stupid. Why didn't I see that branch? Most of the time, just like the rest of our body can heal that scratch, if the rest of our mind is we're pretty well people. We fluff it off. Or the friend you're walking with is like, oh my God, I didn't see it either. Don't worry about it. And it just floats through the neural pathways in the front part of the brain. It's, yeah, no, I'm not really stupid. And it just goes to long-term memory. And you do not believe you are a stupid person. You believe that you didn't see a tree branch and it scratched you. End of story. When things are bigger, so we could, first of all, you have a person who had that thought, but guess what? At school and growing up, people always told them they were stupid. Now when this happens to somebody, the tree branch thing, they actually know they're already stupid. So this is just another bad thing that happens. More often when we have something bigger that happens, so let's say it wasn't a tree branch, it was you were hit by a truck. Now you have huge physical injuries. Okay, you're not going to try to heal them yourself. Your body will try. The body will always try. But resetting its own bones isn't going to help. And things will fuse together. It'll be all wonky, wrong. You'll always be in pain. Or you're just not going to be able to. It's just too much for you. So you go to a hospital. At the same time as you received all that horrible injury, this is trauma, you received a lot of psychological injury. Because maybe nobody was around to help you. Maybe you thought you stepped out accidentally into traffic. There's all kinds of things that will happen in the brain that cause injury. Or even worse, if it's not an accident that causes your trauma, it's by human design. Somebody assaults you. What you're then believing in the worst moment of the assault or the incident that's happening could be any number of things. So when I work with survivors of rape and sexual assault, and we're looking at those bad things on their list, when I ask them, first of all, what was the worst moment of it? It's not always what you or I might think on the outside. It's not the most violent physical act. They'll say, it was when he turned around and smiled.
Ooh.
That was the worst moment. What did you believe about yourself in that moment? I believed that I was worthless. I believed that I was dirty. I believed that I deserved what he did in that moment. If we do not get that person into treatment very quickly for that injury, that is when post-traumatic stress disorder develops. So in the exact same way that we need to treat physical injuries as early as we can before they
set in a weird way,
all bad and set in a weird way, we need to be able to treat the injury of the mind that happened. And we need to help that person to transform that belief into something so much better. It was not my fault. I'm a good and loving person. I did not deserve this. And I can heal.
And you help people transform their vision of themselves from someone who is a victim to someone who is empowered. Would you say that's the transformation that you offer?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm a guide. Everyone comes to me, they do all the work. So my clients are always in the driver's seat, but I have the map. Even though I have the map, they can still, it's like scenic route or direct route. You can still get to it. Because letting go of victimhood and victim mentality is one of the most important components of a recovery journey. Mm-hmm. So it is very important to recognize if we have been victimized. And victim is a really yucky word. It is very uncomfortable. It stands for a lot of bad V's. I call them the bad V's of victimhood. If you're a victim, it means you're voiceless, you're violated in one way, form, or fashion. Sometimes you've been vilified, like it's your fault, and you're vulnerable. In a bad way of vulnerable. Not in the Brené Brown beautiful way of being vulnerable. It's the bad way of being vulnerable. Now, that's important to say, I was a victim. That means I did not do this.
Yeah.
Do we want to stay in victimhood? Do we want to stay those things? No. That is what we can and should be supported to come out of and transform those negative V's into my favorite V's of validated, vindicated, vocal, vibrant, and victorious over what happened to us.
I love it.
The most controversial thing I certainly know that I did after my experience was be happy. If you heard a story about someone, and it was this woman named Shannon Moroney, and no one ever heard from her again. And she fell into what would be understandable coping strategies for her pain, addiction, isolation, all kinds of things. No one would be surprised.
Yep.
There would be no controversy. I am very happy to be a controversial figure. If it's because I can be happy, I can be fulfilled. I just want to be thankful to you for reading my story and for being so willing to share it, and actually for bringing it to me as well. Again, just to revisit a few parts of that in my most lonely and isolated times, when there were people who absolutely refused to go on my journey with me. It never ceased to be an honor now, even years later, when people choose to go on it with me by reading, by engaging, by having these kind of conversations. It's a great gift. I'm very thankful to you for that, Una, and to all your listeners. And I guess really what I want to say is that we do have choices in the most choiceless parts of and moments of our lives. And all of us deserve and need the support to find those choices for ourselves. And we can help others do the same. That's really at the heart of this. I'd love people to, of course, pick up my books. You can find everything at shannonmoroney.com.
Great. We'll leave that link.
My name's not all that easy to spell, but you can look up all kinds of things and get to me. It's weird. Shannon, husband, sex offender, forgiveness. You can look up some great, wonderful things. You can look up whatever you want. You'll find me.
Yeah. And your book is called?
My book is called Through the Glass. So it's my journey. And then I wrote another book. It came out last year called, and it's for your journey. That one's called Heal for Real, a guided journal to forgiving others. I'm going to be on Dr. Phil in a couple of weeks.
That's so exciting.
It's just as exciting as being with you, Una. I have to say. After reading your book, which completely changed my life, and which we will talk about in our next episode, where we talk about body and trauma and how we treat ourselves and all that stuff, then I can maybe get into more about how your book changed my life. Yeah, it's just as exciting to meet you as it was to meet
Dr. Phil. Well, thank you very much. The highest of compliments.
Oh.
Shannon, thank you. I can't tell you how much I've loved having you. I'm so excited for our next conversation. I loved your book. And thank you so much for sharing all this with such grace and vulnerability and so much thoughtfulness. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Una. I appreciate the invitation.
Okay. I think I'm going to have Shannon back because I would love to get into her thoughts on healing from body shame trauma. But in the meantime, here are some of my big takeaways from this conversation. I was so struck by her unbelievable resilience in deciding to be happy, to not let this tragedy define her. I also like how she specified that we have the power to determine our own mindset, but we need a lot of help to maintain that mindset. I really like her emphasis on community support. I loved her advice on how to help people who are going through tragedy, and the fact that she has a greeting card line where all the proceeds go to survivors of sexual assault. Her story about the tree scratching your arm, it really helped me understand trauma. And her example of restorative justice using my kids doing Nicky Nicky Nine Doors at a senior's home, it's actually really made me think about how I discipline in my household. Finally, I learned that I shouldn't shoot a podcast while my home is under construction. So if you're wondering what all those bangs are at the end, that was me. It wasn't you. So feel free to reach out and get in touch and tell me that was totally unprofessional, or any other feedback you have about this episode is always welcome. Until next week. Hey dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.